Episode number 55 of People I Know Show. Curt Carstensen, joined today by Lindsey Hadden in the Hadden household in Minneapolis.
Oh, yeah. Thanks for stopping by.
Yeah, I just stop over whenever and set up the recorder and pull up the microphones. This is a normal time.
It's happened a few times.
Yeah, actually, it has with John, because your husband, John, has been on a few previous episodes.
Yeah. Usually I'm the one in the back bedroom.
You're hiding today. He's not even here, so we don't have to worry about that. And as I go through this process, I want to eventually, if possible, have everyone from my life ideally on, like find the right time, the right type of timing, and the reason to ask someone on the show. And it seemed perfect based on the previous episode 54 with Mark Normand. The person that we referred to in that episode that walked out of his comedy show was you.
That was me.
And it's a perfect time to have a conversation about that and a few other things. So I guess thinking back to that day, which is a little over a week ago from this point, what was going through your mind when you decided it's time to go?
All right. Well, I was thinking, let's do something rude to my friend Curt, who is kind enough to invite me to a comedy show. And this seemed like the perfect thing.
Was that it?
So I plan on going to this, and I love stand-up. So I was like, yeah, it sounds great. I remember I saw a video on Conan. I didn't love the stand-up. I kind of heard like him talking about how it's hard to do comedy in a PC culture. We're just too PC. And I didn't love it, but you know what? Sometimes I love stand-up when I'm there in person. It's much funnier. So I went in open-minded with that lens. Got to the show, and there were some great, if you remember, acts beforehand. 3 very great comics.
That night there was 3 before him, yes.
There were 3 beforehand, and talking a lot about their personal experiences, a lot through therapy, a lot even through like sex abuse and anxiety and depression and moving across the country and feminism and sexism and touching on all these really serious subjects, but making it really funny. And I was just floored. I was laughing the entire time. And then I was like, okay, this is going to be great. The headliner's going to come on. It's going to knock everybody out of the water. And then Mark Normand came on. The first thing he did was point out a woman's cleavage who was sitting right in the front audience. So I was like, okay, this is going to be this kind of show.
And meanwhile, like there was 4 of us, and I was, I think, the edge of the 4 of us, and you were on the other end.
Yes.
So I wasn't noticing, like the 2 Johns that were between us, your husband and the other friend John. Yeah. I noticed their laughter more. I didn't notice what was going on with you very often, just at a distance.
Yeah.
And when he told that joke, or when he made that comment to me, hilarious, because I find him hilarious.
Other
not having no idea what was happening on that end with you.
Yeah, and other people found it funny too, and the woman in front seemed to be laughing. So maybe it was a harmless joke, maybe it wasn't. But anyway, I personally don't like it when people point out my cleavage. So I took it from that perspective.
So you were imagining, what if that was me right now?
Yes, I would be pretty upset.
Okay.
And then he continued to go further, saying, sorry, I don't need to point that out. I am like an autistic person, but with the worst traits. So already not off to a great start.
So you are now considering the different types of people that might be offended?
Yep, I was. And having family members who are autistic, they already have their own challenges. And he's up pointing out, there are bad parts to being autistic. So great.
So you weren't having a good time?
No. And there were a couple of times where I laughed. Like, I wouldn't say the whole time I was sitting there like a monster. But I'm not lying I would be lying if I was saying I wasn't stewing.
Okay.
The thing that finally got me to walk out of the show was after several times of talking about this being too much of a PC culture, some jokes that really I didn't like. I heard about the 3rd person yelling out amen, and then I decided to leave.
So you heard thought and maybe correctly heard people that were condoning some of what he was saying that you didn't agree with.
Oh, so I actually talked to John about this because it really bothered me. John, my husband. And I think part of it was he meant it that it could be challenging to make jokes in a very PC culture because you want to make other people laugh, but you don't know who you're offending. And I think that was his perspective. I think he was earnest in that respect. But I think other people said or took that as, I can't make jokes about other people. I can't be rude to other people. And that's why I'm saying amen.
And then at that moment, that was, you left, and did you know you were leaving for good, or did you not know what you were going to do?
I sat at the bar and watched the World Series.
Okay. So that was that at that moment. And I, from my perspective, I was having a great time. This was just amazing to me. And I thought, well, she must have gone to the bathroom or something. She'll be back. And then as more time went on, then I had other concerns like, are you not okay? I didn't really think that you walked out because you didn't like it. Because as you said, I know that you like stand-up comedy. Yeah. You've been a fan of a number of people on Netflix, and I've tried some of them, and I just assumed that you would have a great time regardless. I didn't know.
I love going to stand-up.
I didn't think that, okay, yes, I find this funny. I know it's super, it's dark or dicey or whatever words that comedians like to use to talk about some of the stuff that he's willing to joke about. And I understand that it's possible people wouldn't like it, but I laugh. I don't know. That's why I had him on my podcast. Like I'm trying to square this with myself, because am I a bad person for laughing at things that I know shouldn't be funny, but they solicit laughter out of me?
John had that same reaction too, because he thought a lot of those jokes are funny. And he actually got a little bit defensive. He's like, are you calling me a bad person then? Do you think that I agree? Because I found those funny and you obviously didn't. Are you judging me? And I think that also was part of the point of view of Mark Normand. Like, he can't say the things that he thought were funny, or he's being judged, or he's demonized for what he thought was funny. And I have to imagine it's tough for comedians because, for example, John and I tried to watch Eddie Murphy stand up from the 80s. Incredibly sexist and homophobic. We had to turn it off because it was so bad.
Is this something you watched since that night as a test, or something you've seen previously?
We watched it over a year ago.
Okay.
So it was, to both of us, we were like, this is not okay. You could never say this in 2019. But being a person who really likes comedy, I think there are so many progressive comedians, and I think comedy is way more inclusive now, like more people of color, a lot more women. Some of my favorite comedians now are women. And I think that you can still make those jokes without having to make jokes at the expense of other people.
And that was an article that I brought up with Mark Normand when I had the conversation with him, because that was on a Wednesday night that we saw the show.
Yeah.
And then you left, and that was a kind of a deal for the next day. And I came over here and we talked about it because I was setting up that conversation with him.
Yeah.
So I tried to take your perspective somewhat into that conversation. And I did it a little bit. I hit on some things that, because I knew the person, or at least one of the people that left his show on that night, it was something I knew I couldn't ignore. We had to talk about. You then listened back to that, having heard him talk in a non-stand-up comedian situation, just more of a real life conversation. Did that affect anything that you took in from watching him perform? Yeah.
So I'm glad you brought that up. So the day after we saw Mark Normand speak, I sent a long, unnecessarily lengthy text to Curt apologizing for being rude and walking out the show. But I sent him an article talking about the comedian Mark Maron, about his he has a very famous podcast called the WTF podcast. And in it, he was talking about Todd Phillips, who is the director of the new Joker movie. He also directed all of the Hangover movies. Now, Todd Phillips has decided to leave comedy. And that's because he believes that his humor is not appropriate for this, quote, woke culture. And nobody will get it or think that he's too irreverent. Mark Maron, who actually is also in the Joker movie, basically said that's a bunch of BS. And he said, if you're too intimidated to try and do comedy that is deep or provocative or even a little controversial without hurting people, then, you're not good at what you do. Just flat out. And some of those, and he also went on to say, like, he thinks that those comedians are being earnest. Like, I think that they really think what they're doing is funny and they like walking the line of controversy. I'm guessing all comedians do, right?
I think that's a part of comedy is bringing up the things that often aren't talked about. That's what resonates with people so often. Yes.
And his big point was, back then it was easy to get a quick laugh just hurting people. But now it's like, that's not necessary anymore. You can talk about some really serious, edgy stuff. And he talks about all these comedians who are being really, really funny, but they're conscious of the feelings of other people. And sometimes you're going to offend somebody. Like, I like comedians who probably overly liberal. Maybe that doesn't hit home with some like social conservatives. So it's not, you can't please everybody, but I don't think you have to make fun of other people.
Yeah. So that's one thing that Mark and I talked in the conversation in last week's episode is anyone's comedy probably isn't going to fit everybody. No. Even if you're very PC, you're not swearing, there's people that'll just find that boring. Like, no matter what you do.
Sometimes I'll find it boring.
Not everyone's going to find whatever you do funny. And then some people are going to find potentially what you're joking about offensive. So I enjoyed that show very much. I like him. I had the conversation. After that, he and I hung out for hours, and it was like a really cool thing for me, just kind of coming out of nowhere. Your husband, John. Yeah. One of the reasons we went to the show is because I think he had seen him before, and he also liked it. So I'm like, okay, let's all go. Yeah. So where do you stand then with him in particular, having heard him talk, knowing that I've built at least a small personal relationship with him, and your husband also enjoys that comedy. So how do you square this all away now for yourself moving forward with whether it's Mark Normand or someone that makes jokes about things that you might not like hearing jokes about?
That's always going to happen. And I also want to say, first off, I don't think Mark Normand is a bad person. And I don't think that people who like his comedy are bad people. I want to make that very, very clear. I think that people can sometimes have a hard time understanding the perspectives of others. I've made comments before that have upset people, and I always take that as a learning opportunity. I'm saying, I'm sorry, and thank you for telling me this, and I won't do that again. So it's sometimes I notice what happens, and John's an example. He immediately thinks that I think he's a bad person. And that's really hard when you grow up thinking that I'm a really good person. Like, I try to do the right thing. I try to be kind to people. And you're telling me I'm a bad person from this comment I made? There's no way. I don't think one action or one feeling makes you a bad person, as long as you're willing to learn from it and understand others' perspectives.
That was one of the reasons why I wanted to have him, Mark Normand, on my podcast. Is he might be the funniest comedian to me right now that I found. And I know some of the stuff that he jokes about. Like, I shouldn't be laughing at this, but it makes me laugh. Some of the things he says still don't make me laugh, but it doesn't bother me because the more I get to know him, the more I realize he just says words that people are unwilling to say because of whatever reason. And often people like it, and probably puts a lot less emphasis on the people that don't like it, just kind of finding his path to build whatever his career is becoming based on the people that really enjoy what he does, with less and less concern for the people that don't enjoy what he does. And I think that's admirable in a lot of professions and a lot of things that people are pursuing, to not focus on the things that people don't like about you, and just really find the people that want to be a fan of you and do your thing. But that gets back to your previous point that's still, it's just a lack of concern for who you might be hurting along the way. And I don't know what to do with it all, because I am a fan of his and I like him as a person.
Yeah.
And there's going to be other comedians similar to him that I might, if I spent more time, I might like their comedy. And none of it, we're not bad people. They're not, I don't think there probably are people that joke about stuff that might be closer to a bad person. I'm really sure that he's not, just by getting to know him. I don't really know what to do with it, except I want to laugh. And I really like when someone makes me laugh.
And that's okay. And I'm not out there with my torch and pitchfork trying to tell every comedian, hey, you are being an insensitive jerk. Let's only talk about PG-13 things. So Aziz Ansari, a while ago, there was an article that came out that a woman alleged that he tried to basically coax her into having sex, and it was a painful and uncomfortable experience.
Mm-hmm.
Aziz Ansari argued, I thought we were on a date, and I was very confused. And this was one of the Me Too movements, or one of the stories that came out of the Me Too movement, that people were like, okay, this is part of these stories don't seem right.
It was near a line. There was plenty of stories that were not on a line and everyone agreed. And this was one that I recall that was like, okay, we don't all agree on this one. What do we do?
Yes. So I think kind of a lot of people came to the conclusion, this was my perspective. And again, I wasn't there. I don't know. But I felt like she was probably giving some signs and he was not picking up on it. Like, I've been on both sides of that. So I had a hard time admitting to people, I still really like Aziz Ansari. Parks and Rec is my favorite show. And I really enjoyed his last stand-up performance. A lot of it was coming out about how, like, look, this was a huge learning experience for me. And also, this is the state of this woke culture. Like, this is like how comedy develops. This is how how we think will change. And we just need to we need to listen more to people and try to understand.
And that's...
So, back to your point, people could argue I'm a bad person for liking Aziz Ansari. I have friends who are like, I'm done with Aziz Ansari. I still like him.
So you're going through this kind of the same thing, just on the other side, where, okay,
yeah,
I like him. He makes me laugh. The thing he did, I'm not so sure about it.
Yeah.
But I don't want to stop liking this person that makes me laugh.
Yeah.
Based on the evidence I have.
Yes, exactly. And there have been comedians who, even my favorite comedians, they'll have some jokes where I'm like, I'm not okay with that. And you have to kind of decide, is this representative of your entire body of work? Or was this, this was a miss. This was probably not one you should have told. But again, I'm not everybody and I don't speak for everybody.
And I don't know how anyone could, so a comedian, sure. We'll stick with the Mark Norman topic. So if he's up there, I don't know how many people are at Acme Comedy Club that night. Let's say there was 250 people in the room.
Yeah.
And some of these jokes that either you or other people are finding to be borderline or definitely offensive or makes them uncomfortable, if 200 of the 250 people are laughing, it's hard to even notice the 50 people that don't. And as I talked about with him, it seems like the goal of a comedian is just to get the most volume of laughter constantly.
Sure.
And it's really hard to focus on or care about the people that aren't laughing when so many people are laughing.
Yeah. Yeah. So obviously that was his crowd. And I was the small sliver of people who it just didn't hit home for me. So obviously people do find him funny. And I don't think all those people are bad people. I mean, there were some that obviously bothered me, but I mean, I'm not God. I can't pass judgment on everybody. I just felt how I felt. And instead of booing him or demonizing him. I took myself out of a situation that made me feel uncomfortable.
Which I think in the conversation with him, he mentioned that like he appreciates when people just bow out and get out of there, like instead of making a scene. But also I knew he felt bad. He doesn't want that to be what happens. I can tell that that's not his intent. And I'd imagine for him or for someone in that situation, trying to square that away of pursuing what you're doing and keep on building and growing your fan base, but yet not upsetting people. It can't be the main concern, but it is. I can't imagine anyone human with feelings totally disregards it. And I'll share this with him that we're having this conversation. And if he listens, I don't know, but your feedback's going to be something that he or any other comedian in that situation is going to have to consider in some way. Like, what do I do about this? And if it needs to even be a concern, I know I want to know it because you're my friend, and that was an experience that was very relevant to me understanding my laughter and what's okay to laugh at. And I wanted to have this conversation with you and put it out there because there's a second side to most stories, and your perspective is definitely worth hearing. And I think we're just kind of scratching the surface so far. Yep.
The sad part is I don't think you ever get to a point where you feel like, are we 100% good? No, I'm not. Those other people are bad people, but I'm not a bad person, right? Oh, you're stuck up. You don't know what you're talking about. It's hard to finally to get to a point where everybody is on the same page. But I feel like we understand each other's perspectives and can respect it, right?
I think so. Yeah. I think step one is having any concern for what other people think if they think differently than you. But step 2 or 3 or somewhere further down the process is really changing your behavior because of these other people. But at least having the awareness to maybe listen, I think is a good step. So that's what this conversation is all about. Just hearing, and what I do with this podcast, I want to bring people that have inspired me to think about something differently. I want to bring that to a larger audience. Yeah. And
I'm glad to hear that Mark Norman was concerned about the fact that I left, and I'm sad that he was sad about it.
Yeah.
I have social anxiety disorder, so I want everybody to like me all the time. So I can't imagine that's a great feeling.
Let's get into that because based on a previous conversation with you, I think that plays into some of what led you to walk out on that time. And correct me if I'm wrong, but it's social anxiety disorder. Get into that more and explain for someone that doesn't experience what you experience.
Yeah.
What you go through.
Yeah. So social anxiety, there are several different types of anxiety disorder. A lot of people have generalized anxiety where just a lot of situations make you feel very anxious. And for some, it's a little bit more personalized. So I'm diagnosed with social anxiety disorder. So being around people in a lot of cases triggers my fight or flight mode to kick in. It makes me uncomfortable. I think about every single interaction I have with a person. And if I feel like a negative interaction happened, then I will obsess over it, sometimes for years. The bad part for that is I'm also an extrovert. So I get a lot of energy from being around people and always want to be around people. My therapist finds it fascinating.
So you're dealing with some things up in the mind of Lindsey Hadden.
Yeah. So in fact, my first session with my therapist, she said, you know what? People with social anxiety disorder, you often compare yourself to other people. So I'd recommend getting off social media. It's what I do for a living. So
you work in social media, and are you on there with your personal stuff as much?
I do it mostly professionally, and I don't talk about myself as much. I'm very much like a student of social media, and anyway, we can go on to that for a totally different digital marketing discussion some other time. But,
okay.
The typical things you would do to address social anxiety disorder were not possible for me. And then adding one more hard thing to it, I have panic disorder. So when I mentioned my fight or flight mode, it means that in social situations, my body is saying, you're going to die and you need to either run or you need to fight. And if I do neither, which sometimes if I'm sitting in a board meeting or I'm on a conference call and I feel that fight or flight mode kick in, my brain is saying, Lindsey, you're not in danger. You're just in an uncomfortable, anxious situation. Eventually it builds up and I have a panic attack. And I've had a couple pretty public ones at the office, and that led me to start going to therapy.
So you're saying in these moments where you do neither fight nor flight and you just sit there, mentally it gets worse and worse and worse until you maybe have a panic attack?
Yeah, at least that's the case for me.
Can you be more specific with an example where this happened and how that gets resolved? I don't know if I've ever seen anyone have a panic attack.
Yeah, and
I know I've heard about it.
Yeah, and lots of people have situations where they start to feel panicky. And I've had types where I would say I have panic symptoms, and I can usually make myself calm down from it. There have been 3 times that I've had the severe panic attacks. When I have a severe panic attack, I'm already starting out by being extra shaky. I'm hyperventilating. And the worst part is I lose the ability to speak. Not physically, but mentally. I can't make words come out. It's not an uncommon thing, but it's not everybody gets it. The thing that makes it so scary, it's hard to, if you haven't felt it, could be really difficult to imagine. But you truly feel like the world is ending and that you're going to die and everybody else is going to die.
That's the feeling is that. And at the same time you're having this feeling are thoughts that are opposing that going through your mind? Yeah,
because rationally, like, Lindsey, you're just like typing up this brief. What do you, like, you're sending an email. This email says, sounds good, period. Like, why are you having a panic attack? But it was a difficult thing to overcome. And it took a lot of therapy, a lot of doing some mind-body wellness stuff, taking the right medicine, and then doing lots of daily things that positively impact my well-being. And honestly, I think I've gotten a lot better. And I feel like I have a third of my headspace back because I'm not obsessed over what everybody's thinking about me at every single moment, or if I've offended them, or if I've lost a friend forever, or if I, like sabotaged an entire company because I said the wrong thing in a meeting. But really, if I'm talking to somebody, they're probably just thinking about, I wonder what I should make for dinner today.
Is that how you've been able to improve this? Is recognizing that the people around you aren't going to be very often concerned with the things that you're concerning yourself with?
There's a lot of skills that you can learn. The one technique that's worked for me is accepting that I'm never going to lose or be cured of my anxiety. So what I do is just need to be aware of it, acknowledge it, and then try to rationalize it in my head. So sometimes I'll be sitting down with somebody and I notice, I feel really anxious. And then I try to think about what is making me anxious. I need to just accept that and say, Lindsey, this is not the time to be anxious. Or, hey, I see how you could be really anxious in this situation. That's really tough. And I'd be more sympathetic with myself. But it's using different techniques, being aware of my surroundings, and overall trying to be more present.
Does doing this bring some of these feelings, knowing that we're going to be doing this today, knowing that someone's like listening to us talk? Does that have any impact?
No.
Which I think some people get intimidated by this type of thing. So this is not at all.
Oh, well, I'm a little...
You're a little different.
Yeah. Again, that goes to my extroversion. And also with me, I tend to dive into things that terrify me or that are unfamiliar to me. So I actually did college radio, and I did that for quite a long time. And I just decided that it was going to be a fun thing. I was going to try really hard, and I was just going to be prepared and get used to talking to people. It helped a lot. That doesn't work for everybody. A lot of people with social anxiety disorder are agoraphobes, which means that they could either be afraid of large spaces or just they avoid interacting with people at all. Like being around people causes those symptoms of anxiety, and they just try to avoid it altogether. And I am always thinking about, all right, who's free to hang out? What are we going to do tonight?
There are not many empty nights in your social calendar, from what I've gathered from knowing you over the years.
No, I since moving here, I went from having no friends to having trouble keeping track.
So would you say you have too many friends?
I would never say I have too many friends.
But you have a number of friends greater than you can properly hang out with to like maintain the relationship you want? Or do you see everybody enough and really connect with them enough?
I try really hard to be good friends with a lot of people.
Sounds exhausting. I think I do the same thing.
Yeah.
But it is kind of exhausting.
You know what? Sometimes there have been times where I had to kind of back off and be like, you know what? I don't have the emotional and mental ability, like space to be a good friend to you. And sometimes that just means I need to take time to myself and refresh and focus on me. And that helps me be a better friend. But yes, I not only do I like being very active, but I also like being close friends with people.
I know you have some notes here, and you're probably thinking about this conversation as we've been preparing for it for a few days. Is there something related to your extroversion or the social anxiety or comedian, something that we haven't talked about yet before we kind of approach the end of this part of the conversation?
Yeah. For my social anxiety, it's learning that I can't control every social situation or assume that I know what's happening with every single social situation. It's hard to be present when you're just focused on how your behavior impacts others. But really, the biggest thing is going to therapy, learning a lot of different skills to help cope with my anxiety, and then trying to be a better productive person, accepting that, hey, this is just a thing I deal with. Kind of like sometimes somebody has like a bad back or somebody has a upset stomach a lot. I have anxiety. I just have to figure out how to cope with it.
Let's go back to something I think you mentioned in passing earlier, and I know you and I talked about the last time that I saw you, is that occasionally or maybe frequently you'll have a previous interaction with a person that didn't go as well as you thought it should, or something happened with somebody, and up until the next time you see that person, or maybe even after the next time you see that person, something sticks with you very prominently in your mind, whether or not it does to that person. And when you mentioned that previously, and I know you touched on it a little bit before, but we didn't really get into it, I imagine this to be something that a lot of people deal with to some extent.
Oh, I'm sure everybody
and doesn't get talked about enough.
Yeah.
So let's get into that little conversation.
So I'm not exaggerating when I say that there have been things I've said to somebody and I assume that I had some kind of impact. I don't actually know. I just assume. I have been thinking about it for years, and it's gotten better. I've gotten a lot better at dealing with it, but it's still something that's a struggle for me. Even small things like, after we saw Mark Norman together, I could not sleep that night because I'm like, I offended Curt. I'm such a jerk. I'm such a bad person. Why would I do this? Who am I to say I know everything about everybody? And Curt must hate me, and he'll never want to hang out with me or John again.
Well, that's true. I don't want to hang out with you ever again. No.
So what ended up happening is you said, don't apologize for that. Like, why would you apologize?
Yeah, I just wanted to understand you. I didn't care. I mean, you be you. And maybe that's me more than the average person. I don't know. But the more I recognize that we're all different and we all react to situations in different ways, I'm okay with people being who they are, and I just want to learn more about it.
Yeah.
I'm not going to judge people on that. Whatever. You do whatever you do, and I'm going to keep doing what I do. And if we have conversations occasionally, maybe we'll get more and more in line with how each other thinks and behaves, and we'll all get along better. But in the meantime, that's fine.
Yeah. If you know flat out that you said something wrong, like I said, Curt, you are the biggest jerk since the jerkiest jerk of jerks.
Maybe I need to hear that. Maybe it's true.
Then, yeah, that's a rude thing to say to somebody. And why is it warranted?
But if that is true, like I didn't take it seriously when you said it right now, because I don't think that you think that, and I don't believe that's true. But there is the biggest jerky jerk of Jerksville somewhere in the world. And maybe this person doesn't get that communicated to them in a way that ever clicks with them, and they just keep being a jerk. Whether or not they care, who knows? Maybe that's what makes them who they are. And I think it's important to start telling people. And I think as we get into the next part of this conversation, I'll bring up something that I did in Kansas City. But I think it's important to say what you feel to people. And I don't always do that. Like, I grew up not wanting to, like, start any problems, so I wouldn't say these things. And I think I had the experiences of something negative happening and then not talking about it and not knowing how to react to it the next time. I'm recognizing that, yes, that's a part of who I am based on my upbringing, or maybe it's the Midwestern culture or my family or the religious ties. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's an American thing. I don't think it's that helpful.
Yeah, I actually, since I moved to the Midwest, I realized, like, oh, you kind of don't say everything that you're thinking or how you feel. In most situations, I would meet people and they say, you ask a lot of questions that I would never ask somebody. And I don't think I'm being rude or I'm prying. I've had to tone it back a bit. But yeah, they would call me out for stuff like that. Or if I was in an office and I was upset about something that happened at work, I would tell my boss. And my boss thought that was like the straw that broke the camel's back. Like, there must be so much that she's not telling us.
And when I hear you talk about that, I think that's a common trait maybe of East Coast people, but you're a Pacific Northwest person from the state of Washington. So is that a Lindsey thing, or do you think that's very common where you're from?
It's very common where I'm from. Like, most people just kind of say what they say.
So us
what they
people
feel.
here in the flyover states in middle America are the people that don't do that so much, and the coastal people do?
Or maybe I'm the person who's wrong. Who knows? But I'm used to saying everything that I felt to my friends and to my family.
So have you then done less and less of that now since you've lived here for a few years?
Yes.
And how does that make you feel?
It was extremely hard on my social anxiety because I did not know if I was offending people or not.
Because you added a layer of what you were concerned with now. If like you had previously said things that you shouldn't have, or you wish you wouldn't have, or they're thinking about.
Yeah. I went back to middle school feeling like, I should just not say anything at all because I'm offending everybody.
Is it tough being you sometimes, Lindsey?
Yeah, it's exhausting.
Ugh. Well, I like having you as a friend.
Oh, thank you. I like having you as a friend.
I was in your wedding. We're a little over a year ago now.
Yeah, and you gave a great speech.
I gave a speech, and I was all worried about that before I gave it. That's like one of the things I don't usually prepare.
You nailed it.
Thank you. I prepared for that probably as far in advance as anything I've ever prepared for, because I wanted it to be good, and I was struggling with it to kind of come up with something. Let's use this as a transition point, because I think once or twice before you got married, and now maybe since then once, I'd have to really think back, but we've traveled together somewhat.
Yeah.
And with you and John, and sometimes John and I, and I'll let you speak for the both of you on this topic of traveling, because as I have people I know show, I like to explore topics that might press people's boundaries a little bit, like what we just went through, but also additionally a way you've influenced me, John and you, and I don't even know who the person behind it all is, but when it comes to traveling, I was once someone that hadn't traveled a lot, and I would show up to places with nothing in mind, and then I'd start looking for what I'm going to do there, waste all kinds of time, not do anything. And I've learned from traveling with the two of you that you got to really get your shit together before you go and get a plan. You don't need to stick to the plan, but you need to have a plan and start going places and doing things. And I was just in Kansas City with my brother to watch the Minnesota Vikings play in a road game at the Kansas City Chiefs, the Kansas City football team. I don't know if I can say that other word. I used to not say that word because it's offensive to Native Americans, in some circles at least. The list of the things that I was going to do, I built it a little bit, and then I talked to you, and you gave me a big long list, and it made it so easy. I'm like, okay, I'm going to do the things I want to do, and then I'll try to do a few of the things that Lindsey said. And I didn't waste time. We didn't waste time, and it was a good trip.
Oh, I'm glad. That's
so you're
awesome.
helping me. You're when I go somewhere.
Yeah, I'm glad that you had that reaction, because most people we talk to, the amount of planning we do for trips is exhausting. People just like to go with the flow and kind of look stuff up on their phone, see what's common or popular on Yelp. And we don't like to have downtime or waste time looking stuff up. We want to know where we want to go. And then, of course, there's room for flexibility, but we see so much on a trip, more than most people would spend in twice that amount of time. But we go to museums, we try different restaurants, we have different cool cultural experiences and meet exciting people. And we love that type of planning. In fact, one of John's and my first, I think it was our first big trip together. It was in 2013. We spent all of the month of July traveling the East Coast because neither of us had spent much time there. When we were in Washington, D.C., we were on the subway or on the train with these guys who were standing in front of the map. We needed to see it to find out where we were supposed to get off. I asked them to move, but John would never do that because he would just say, just wait until they move and we'll just try to worm our way in and see if we can look at it better. I'm like, no, they're in our way. We can just ask if they'll move. It's not a big deal.
They weren't looking at the map? They were just standing away?
No, they're just standing in front of it.
Yeah.
So this is a very common Lindsey-John interaction. So we ended up just talking to those two, found out that one of the guys there worked in Boston. He was just from DC and they're watching the game, or watching the baseball game because we were coming home from a baseball game. We were telling them about our trip. He said it sounded amazing. And when we got to Boston, we should hang out with him. And he gave us a cool tour of Harvard and walked us around Cambridge, took us to a really cool restaurant, gave us a ton of recommendations on stuff to do. And we wouldn't have had that experience if we didn't try to talk to people or ask them to move out of the way from the subway map.
So that was kind of a turning point in how you traveled based on having a plan going into that city, or what really stood out about that moment with the map?
I think it was a combination of both John and myself. John honestly plans 95% of our trips. I only recently planned a trip in its entirety to Europe. So I had that. But John is a planner and likes to do all the things and make sure everybody gets what they want. And it makes trips so much fun for me. But he also will not talk to people, will not try to ask for recommendations or get directions. But because I am an extrovert,
yes.
I love talking to strangers and meeting new people and finding cool things to do. I think it makes the trip way exciting. And
he's mentioned that to me as well. I don't know if he's jealous or envious that when I'm with him, I'll be the person that'll initiate a conversation that he just wouldn't do, but oftentimes it'll help us in some way.
Yeah. I know he likes that about you quite a bit. Curt is fearless. He has no problem doing anything. He admires you for that.
I don't feel like I'm fearless, but I don't know. I stop thinking about it and I go, maybe that means fearless.
Well, he really admires that about you.
The travel. So yes, that's something I don't talk about a lot, I think, in my conversations, because I don't know, maybe the people I'm having on, I don't have the travel experiences with. But my first episode with George was about traveling, and he's influenced me in some ways. And it's been him. And then the two of you and John, recognizing, okay, when I go places, I can now be the person. I can lead it. I can make sure that where we go, we're doing a lot of fun things, not wasting time. I know my brother, Chuck, who's been on an episode as well, he really appreciates about me too. He doesn't have to worry about it. We did all kinds of things. Yeah. I asked him if he wanted to give me feedback. I took it. Rarely he needed to give me any. And we just went. And one of these things you said, was it something Lady Lounge?
The Green Lady Lounge.
Green Lady Lounge in Kansas City. A place that wouldn't have come up on my search. Whatever I would have searched, I probably wouldn't have seen it. It was just one of the highest ranking things that you told me about. Because of that, we had a little time. We were in the neighborhood. I told Chuck we're going to this place because Lindsey liked it. And we went there. And it wasn't necessarily what we would want to spend our whole night doing. It was a jazz lounge, live music, no TVs with sports on, which is kind of our thing. But by doing that, by going there, he now realized that with his wife, Melissa, who was on also, it seems like everyone's getting on my podcast finally. We're getting there.
Everybody you know is on the show.
That's kind of the point if I can keep doing this. Chuck had never done that with her, and now he realized, oh, this is a place that she would like, and now he can be more aware of it and find a place like that they can go to together, because that's how this works. You influence me to go somewhere I might not have gone. John and I have gone to a similar jazzy lounge before. That's not like what I seek out, but I can enjoy it. And now I show Chuck, and now Chuck can bring Melissa, and that's how we learn. We show people things that we like, and then if you have an open mind, you do it, and then some of the stuff clicks, and you keep doing it, and you show other people.
Yeah, I think we had that same experience in St. Louis when we went to that insane karaoke bar.
That was something else.
You got that recommendation from somebody, and we went, and it was amazing.
Yes, I don't remember the name of it. It's in a part of town where it's just kind of weirdly in this spot, kind of in the middle of not a whole lot of activity.
Yeah, imagine an entire bar made out of disco lights in the interior, and karaoke with backup dancers, and then full-on dance party afterwards.
Oh, it was nuts. I will post that into these show notes so I can find the name later, but I certainly can't think of it right now.
Oh, it is a treasured memory of ours.
Oh, yeah.
Loved it.
If I go back to St. Louis, it's a place that I would take someone to because it's just so different. And these types of places exist everywhere. And if you stay on the beaten path while traveling or don't really try that hard to do a lot of things, you're just going to miss so much.
Yeah.
So you gotta just push through. Don't worry about sleeping too much. I think just you get enough rest and then go. That's how I do it. I know not everyone wants to do that.
Yeah.
But I hope more people consider just really taking in as much as they can and having a good plan so you can get it.
Yeah, absolutely. That's how we feel too.
Excellent. With that, let's move on to the personal growth segment, Lindsay.
Yeah.
The personal growth segment is basically, as it's described in the title, it's an opportunity for you to share something about your personal growth, something that you think is important that by you sharing might help some others.
Yeah. So we kind of already talked about my two biggest ones, which was going to therapy and getting a better understanding and getting the skills I need to address my anxiety disorders. And a couple other things, like assuming I know what everybody's thinking based on some small thing I said that nobody probably even cared about. But there is one thing that I really try to make an effort to change that doesn't have to do with that. And it's about being late. So I have, in my past and most of my life, been late for everything. And I just thought it was like, oh, this is this fun thing that I do. And it's not a big deal. And as long as I'm not like late for surgery or something, it can't be that big of a deal.
Yeah.
But it really bothered John. And it took me a while. In fact, he had to just send me an article about this CEO in Australia, that when you are late, it is like telling the person you are going to meet up with that your time is more valuable than theirs.
I was late today coming here, Lindsay.
I wasn't upset about it.
Okay, so that's the part. Some people don't care.
There's a whole thing. And that was like, if you give somebody notice saying like, look, I'm going to be late. This is when I'm expected to be here. That's great. you're being conscious of.
And I gave you about a half hour notice that I wasn't sure I was going to make it at the time I said I would.
It was great. You were being very conscious of my time. And if I had a crunch, then I could move stuff around. But that gives me enough time to act. Honestly, I got better notes and I tried to practice what I was going to say a little bit. It worked out great.
Okay.
But if it's 10 minutes late or 20 minutes late and you haven't heard anything from a person, that's so disrespectful.
I agree with that.
Yeah. And I didn't get that. So I was basically telling my husband, your time is not valuable to me. So screw you.
You would previously be late by in whatever extended time with no communication about your tardiness?
Yeah. I would just say, it's fine. Who cares if I'm late?
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And now when people do it to me, I get really upset. And like, it's fine. Sometimes it's not a big deal, but you're telling me you're going to be here at this time. This is when I'm expecting you. So you're just saying that you can just come and go as you please. And my time is bendable.
And we all grow up with different rules around that. And I assume people get to adulthood when they're really in charge of their own time, with varying degrees of concern for that. And maybe it's just not communicated that well in a very passive aggressive place in the world like Minnesota, where if someone's showing up late and not communicating about it, maybe that's the thing that goes undiscussed between people, and it makes the one person not like the other person, and maybe not get invited the next time, or however that plays out in some circumstances, where if you just talk about it and share how important or how rude this is, maybe that makes some changes. And it seems like you and John talking about, I don't know how many times you had to talk about it before your behavior started to change, or your communication about your behavior. Yeah. But it seems to have made a difference eventually.
Yeah, it did. And actually, honestly, it's part of a bigger thing. I don't know if you've ever done the 5 love languages thing, but you can do it for like relationships, friends, etc. Mine is words of affirmation. So telling people how I feel, having those serious conversations. That's how I show love. John's is acts of services. It's one of the 5 ones. Then I can send you a link too if you've never heard.
I've done it. No, I've definitely done it. I can put a link.
So stuff like showing up late or not picking up around the house, because I'm also a slob. Again, I thought it was one of those cute, quirky things I did. It's not.
Being a slob is sexy.
Yeah. No? I was telling my husband because acts of service is your love language. Me not doing these actions that make you happy is me saying I don't love you. And that killed him. Like, imagine, for me, it's all about words. So I have to talk about stuff and talk about my feelings. That makes sense. It was hard for me to understand that my actions speak 1,000 words, apparently. So that's something we really worked on.
That sounds like something that people need to know what other people are dealing with that, because I am not always on time. I am very good about communicating if I'm not going to be on time. And there are certain things I just would never be late for. Yeah. And it's kind of like, it's not quite heart surgery, but I don't miss flights. I mean, maybe I don't fly quite enough to have it be that great of a risk, but I don't miss flights. I show up to work before I'm supposed to be there, not by much. And I have this thing with time where I, as a procrastinator and as an optimist, and I've read an article about this that really connected with me. I'm both super optimistic and procrastinator. And when those two lines cross, I think I can accomplish more in the amount of time that I have than I can. And then I'm rushing to be somewhere, and then I'm almost late, or I'm late. And I think that's what happened today. I thought I had enough time to have this meal and then get over here. And I was relying on other people to like serve and bring the bill and all that. It didn't happen quite as quickly. You didn't care. I communicated. Yeah. But imagine how many times we go through life where the person on the other end of this cares and they don't say, or we don't recognize how that one inconsiderate use of our time impacts negatively our future with that person, or with this business, or something that we've missed. It's happened and we don't even know it.
Absolutely. Yep. And those things that I try to, instead of worrying about, I wonder what other people think of me, and internalizing it and letting it paralyze me, I just try to be conscious of the things that I know make people happy or unhappy, and just work with that.
Let's now go to the being wrong segment, as I think the personal growth segment is very useful. Now, what do you have to share about being wrong that might also be worth hearing for our audience?
Oh, what don't I have to be wrong about is more of the... but I think the thing that came to mind when I was trying to think about where I was wrong is dictating relationships. I mentioned that I really like meeting new people, but I also like having those really deep, intimate relationships. But I'm always the one who decides how that relationship is. Big example is my relationship with my sister. Overall, we have a great relationship. Like, we text, we love each other, we send each other gifts during the holidays and birthdays. It's great. But I think that to have a great relationship, we need to talk on the phone all the time. We need to talk about our feelings. We need to do everything for each other and drop everything to do something for each other. So when I think about it, that's extremely unrealistic. I do know sisters who are like that with each other, but that's their personalities and that's what works for them. And it was a hard thing for me to accept with my sister because I basically wanted my sister to be my best friend on my terms. My sister's a great person. She's a great partner. She's a great friend, and she's a great family member. She is flawed, but aren't we all? But in some ways, she's just the best person. So I need to, if I have a relationship with somebody, I need to accept it for what it is. If it's a bad relationship and that we don't get along or we get stress or anxiety from being around each other, that's a toxic relationship, and you need to, take a hard look at that. But ours is good, and it's based on our own terms.
Being wrong about needing, desiring, expecting someone else to adapt to what you want, as opposed to finding the compromise between you and the other person's personality.
You kind of compare yourself or your relationships to those of others. And people do it all the time, especially with Instagram and stuff like that and social media. But, you're only seeing this one-sided view of relationships. Like some people could be one way in public group settings and totally different at home. You don't know what they're going through. But when it comes to friendships and relationships, as long as it's not toxic or hurtful, I just try to accept your relationship for what it is and try not to change the person or try to change how they love you.
Do you find, since you adapted to this new approach for yourself, that your relationships have improved in certain ways?
Yeah. And also I've stopped being as self-conscious about how I am because I'll text my sister about a bunch of stuff. We have a lot of the same interests. We think a lot of the same things are funny. We have stuff we always like to recommend to each other. My sister is horrible at texting back, just awful and awful at calling people. It drives me crazy because I love texting and talking. And it used to be if I didn't hear from her, I just would not text her for months. And I would get mad that she doesn't text or call me. But you know what? That's just who she is. And I'm a person who likes to text and talk. So I'm just going to send her a bunch of texts and she can respond or not respond. And she just does that. And sometimes she'll text me like, sorry, yeah, I did get your text a while back. This is funny.
But it didn't elicit an immediate response for her, whereas for you, it would.
Yeah, I'm the person who wants to have like a 10-hour long text conversation or talk on the phone for 8 hours.
How many hours in the day do you have? So you had 25 recently.
Everybody has 68 hours in a day, right?
Well, I thought we had 25 for the one day a year just a few days ago here in the daylight savings thing. But
but it balances out with 24 when you go back.
Yeah, I understand. But you seem to have, I know you're not totally serious with all this, but like I realize I've run out of time. Someday I've gotten to the point. Some days it's a good feeling to be doing so many things that I want to be doing that I am actually some days too busy to have some of the behaviors I used to have where I would text a lot more or be in contact with more people. Now I don't have time some days.
Yeah.
And it's a great feeling to feel like I'm doing things that are important. That means I have to put aside this like sitting on my phone and texting.
Yeah.
But then it's like, I'm not like being in touch with people the way I was. And is that okay? It's something I kind of deal with.
Oh, yeah. I've turned into an obsessive like iPhone technology life dictator. So I use the reminder setting. The second something pops in my head to do something, set a reminder for like when I get home, I need to go and do this. When I get to work, I need to send this email. In 2 months from now, I need to change my toothbrush head. That is 100% in my to-do list right now. I'm not joking.
Could you put one of those on my to-do list? Because I think I need to do that too.
Absolutely. But John and I have a shared calendar of all our stuff that we have going on. So I'm able to, and this is being conscious of other people's time too. Like I can say, I'm busy these days. I'm free these days. What time works for you? Instead of saying like, oh, we should hang out. oh, sure, this day works. Oh, yeah, I forgot I double booked. Sorry.
So you both make it happen sooner if it's going to happen. If you're going to make a plan, you get it done sooner, but you're also not needing to verbally connect with John about making a plan because you can see that you don't have a plan in place previously with him. It just seems like you're more efficient then with some of the stuff.
That has been a learned thing.
Okay.
But also I can't always do that. Sometimes we do have really busy schedules, but I'm an extrovert. I get energy from being around people. John is a huge introvert and is drained. So we could have tons of stuff packed into a week. And just because we have an empty day doesn't mean I get to schedule something. A lot of times he needs a recharge day.
I'm very aware of that.
Yeah. So I will say, hey, I noticed we have this day open on the calendar. So-and-so wants to get together and do something. Do you think you can do this? And if he says, no, I'm too tired, then we don't do it.
So free days don't mean fill the day. It means maybe John doesn't want to do something that day and let's check with him.
Yeah. I mean, if we have like nothing on the calendar for a week, then feel a little okay putting something on the calendar. And so does he.
Cool. And I think maybe that's normal. People in relationships or marriages have these types of things, but I'd imagine there's individuals that haven't come with quite a good way as you have to plan together with the shared calendar. And I'm sure there's other people that are doing something better than you guys are that you could learn from as well. So it's just good to talk about some of these things because I had not really considered these shared calendar things until I knew that you two did. In fact, I don't know anybody else that does it. So maybe you are a rare.
Oh, we've started converting couples.
Converting couples.
Yep. It's a game changer, but what works for you and what doesn't.
There's one thing I want to bring up going back to a little bit earlier in the conversation. I forgot to talk about it, but I mentioned I was going to in Kansas City.
Yeah.
Vikings game, football game. We tailgated all morning. It was great. Great experience at Arrowhead Stadium. Chuck and I, we were seated upper level. Not that many Vikings fans around us. There was a lot of Vikings fans in this stadium in Kansas City, which was a cool thing to be a part of. Right around us, though, there wasn't. And there was one guy sitting right in front of me and one guy sitting 2 rows behind me that over the course of the game, I came to not like very much based on their behavior as me being the opposing team's fan. And I did something I've never done before in my life. So the game didn't go well. The Vikings lost right at the end on a field goal. It sucked. I wasn't in a good mood. Things had been brewing, though, where I did not like the person in front of me or the guy behind me. And it just kind of happened. It was not the plan. The guy in front of me turned around. And I don't know if he put out his hand or I put out mine, but we shook hands. But as we shook hands, I looked at him and said, I don't like you. You were an ass or something like that.
Oh, my gosh.
But immediately said, I might have been just as big of an ass. I don't know. But I was in a bad, like after a game, oftentimes players in media or players and coaches get like a 10-minute cool down. I didn't have this. I was fan of my team and I was not happy with how it went. And the guy that I liked the least was like staring at me. And I didn't know what else to do except tell him how much I didn't like him, but also very quickly inform him that I might have been just as equally unlikable. And I don't really know how well he even heard or if this threw him off guard. Nothing really came of it. But then there's other people around me that I liked that had a good rapport. It wasn't like a mean, because it doesn't need, you can be a fan of opposing teams in a stadium and just kind of have fun with it. But some people really make it negative. And those people brought out the negative in me, I think. And while other people around me, I was like hugging them and thanking them. But that person I didn't like, and the guy behind me, same thing. I did this. I don't know what they received from it, if they heard it, if they understood it. But the point was, I guess you don't need to be such an ass to the opposing team. I don't think I would be. Sure. But I did become more of an ass when these people were like saying and doing what they were to me. And I don't know. I felt as this is a means of me expressing things that I'm not sure of and trying to learn and understand. I wanted to share that I did something unlike I'd ever done before. It just really, I called people out and then I left.
Wow. That is ballsy. But I am so intimidated at sports games, or like if, in fact, I was on the bus and somebody was just playing their music super loud without headphones and I wanted to yell, turn your damn music off. I hate this. But I'm impressed that you flat out called somebody out, because then maybe he'll keep doing that again.
Maybe. That was alcohol aided, though. It was alcohol and just total disappointment of time and effort spent to have a loss for the team that I cared about.
Yeah.
I wouldn't do that on a bus with someone with loud music. I would be passive aggressive, Minnesota nice, deal with it, walk away. In that moment, it was that person was in my bubble, and I didn't know what else to do except be honest, tell the person how much I did not like like him, but then realize that maybe I was just as unlikable. I don't know what people saw from me. I was hoping it wasn't that bad, but maybe it was.
I have a different perspective being a Seahawks fan. We went to the Seahawks-Vikings game together, and Seahawks fans were not very chatty, were they?
No, that was different. And that was in Minnesota, and I was sitting with you, and, that was any banter between you and I in that situation is fine. But when a total stranger makes really negative comments right around you, knowing that they're directed at me.
Yeah.
Oh, why? You don't need to do that.
Yeah.
And then when they do that, then I guess I'm not able to control my reaction, and I don't know exactly what I did every time. But I wasn't great. I wasn't great either. I'm not an angel by any means. It happened, and I think it's something new and interesting to talk about. So I'll leave it there for now. Thank you for sharing that moment and the whole conversation with me today, Lindsey.
Oh, thanks for having me.
And I'd hope that there's something to be learned from knowing that things that make me laugh don't make everybody else laugh. And I don't know. I don't know exactly where I'm going to take it, but I think this is important.
Oh, I'm glad you thought so. I'm glad we had the conversation. Thank you.
Thank you for being willing to do this.
Yeah.